Namaskara, good evening, and welcome to BIC Hybrid. BIC Hybrid, where we have a few people in the auditorium and three very state-starved actors also back on the floor, along with three other actors joining us, two other actors joining us on Zoom. This is Performing Gender, Women in Contemporary Indian Theatre, in collaboration with Museum of Art and Photography, as part of their series, Women in Art and Culture. So we have, as I mentioned, we have four theater practitioners who happen to be women with us. We always have, we look at theater as a giant homogeneous blob. And the first thing that comes to a layperson who may not have been involved in theater as pertaining to entertainment, as passing of time, as something that you do not so seriously. And I'm sure that's true of many of our parents and parent figures as well. Within this homogenized blob of theater is a tinier, darker corner where women practice their art form. And instead, I will not be introducing these four women and their work. I would like them to do it. And I would, this is also a part of the ploy where one wants to get women to talk about themselves, their work, and categorize it in their own terms and use words that they want to be used when people talk of their work. So my first question to all four of you is, what is your theater? The kind of theater that you practice? How would you characterize it, and how would you place yourself within the framework of the practice of quote unquote theater? And please speak to us about the evolution of your practice and your process. You will also, some of you have visual aids as well, so you'll also get to see a little bit of their work. And we will begin with Deepika's introduction.
Hi, you can hear me, right? Yes. Shall we have a clip before I start?
An uncle and auntie came and sat in the third or fourth row where I'm sitting actually. We were a bit panicked. We hadn't officially let people in, and we told them that,
Thank you. That was a show actually performed right where this event is taking place at the Bangalore International Centre. It's called Pyare 2020G, originally commissioned by the Serendipity Arts Festival that went virtual, now an independent show. The proposition of this show was the missing liveness of theater and the fact that we were performing in this extremely dissonant manner suddenly. And so it was streamed out of an empty theater, the wonderful auditorium at the BIC. And I think it was nostalgic for that moment because people hadn't been into the theater at the time because of the pandemic. But to speak to the larger question of what my theater is, I think I would certainly call it predominantly a search for form. And over the years, it has evolved into one of its larger questions, like its philosophical pondering, as it were, would be to see the female body actually on stage. When you see a female body on stage, what does that look like? And often I've tried to come up with it's evolving, like even its trajectory has been evolving. So I often think of it as my theater takes the female body onto stage and looks at it as a site of possibility, of protest, of potential. And yeah, we can see another clip and then I'll talk on a little further.
Hey, you He's like, Macha, tell me we're going to the club bar. I was like, yeah, bro, we are going to the club bar.
That's a solo performance. I think the video has a bit of a lag. Maybe we can pause that. That's a solo performance called No Rest in the Kingdom, which I've written, directed, and performed. It's produced by the Sandbox Collective, and we've traveled a fair amount with it. I think we've done about 50 shows of this performance, and it looks at the way masculinity, in the way that we know it currently, takes up an inordinate amount of space. And essentially, one of the things that the show tries to do is to make the audience complicit in some of the scenarios that it describes, and they're rooted in very, very specific South Asian bodies and languages and dialects and, of English, but very particular kinds of Englishes, creating perhaps an environment or space in which these characters are rooted. And again, this is often seen as a stand-up show in a lot of ways, because there's an actor and a stool and not much else really. And the form of this show is really has really evolved with its different performances, given that it uses the audience a fair bit in its progress. Perhaps another one. No, maybe I'm not here. If you have that, that's actually Sharanya, one of the panelists. That is a show called I'm Not Here, an 8-step guide in how to censor women's writing. Most recently, this show was at the Singapore Fringe as video on demand because we couldn't travel there, sadly. It's supported by the Goethe Institute, Max Muller Bhavan, Bangalore. And the show is really about the invisibility of women writers through the ages, but for a show that is about writing and writers, it's a dance theater production with 2 performers. And again, I think this is a continuing experiment that I started with I'm Not Here, where the female body becomes the site of scrutiny, but also has agency in that it asks the audience certain questions by it's simply existing. And the performers constantly look at themselves and are surrounded by the audience on 4 sides in a boxing ring. So the audience looks at itself, it looks at the performers, as well as the performers have this. So it's a show that really involves a lot of looking and a lot of silence. Yeah, and I think over the years, I would say that live music and movement have become very much part of my work. In fact, sometimes they are the diving boards from which work evolves. So there is only a sense of something, there is a mood, there is an idea, and suddenly when you go into the room, these are the clues that are available to you, and we start making work. So whether it's text-based work, because I do work as a playwright as well, or it's work that is completely devised, such as this, perhaps. I think the idea of what one wants to say and how one wants to say it are never really exclusive. Like, these questions are never really apart from each other. In fact, they are meant to aid each other. And I also think my theater, and that's a show called A Brief History of Your Hair, supported by the India Foundation for the Arts, Lashva Studios, and the New Voices Arts Project, if I remember correctly. And this is also a show with movement and music. Yeah, this is actually one of the earlier pieces, and then I think the chronologically you saw the first piece last and the last piece first. I think I'd be able to talk more about it in context in relation to other people's work and also in relation to other questions. So I'm gonna stop here. and pass it forward. Thanks.
Rashmi. So I see my work as an intersection between Kannada and English theatre, as well as proscenium and playback theatre. That's a photo from Ashi Matturenu, a queer-themed love story that I directed, written by Kavya Srinivasan. And it's basically a love story of two girls. And I think that's where it started. Initially, when I started directing, my first play was Kurchigalu. I'm sure one of the pictures is somewhere there, and I shall bring it up. That's playback theater. I shall come back to it. So initially, when I started, I think it just progressed into looking at subversive narratives. And from the second play onwards, I decided I am not going to pick a play that does not pass the Bechdel test. And that's how Ashimaturenu happened, because it was all about the women. And for once, men were playing the supporting characters of women in the story, and women were the stars. So playback theater is another form of theater that I do, and playback and proscenium theater is another meeting point for me. So playback is essentially where we take stories from the audience and play it back to them. This is from one of our Ode to Resistance. This was back when CA protests were happening, and we thought one way we could give back to the community was actually hear the voices and the stories of the protesters, of the people who had been resisting, and play it back to them. And this kind of bleeds into my proscenium rituals as well. I use tools of psychodrama. That's Kurchigalu, my first direction. So it bleeds into psychodrama, and listening is something that is a non-negotiable in playback theater, because we are literally listening to the story of our teller on the spot. And we cannot afford to be missing even a single moment there, because we're going to play it back, improvise it at that instant. So that kind of bleeds into my proscenium automatically, and those rituals bleed in there. As well as my proscenium also comes into playback, where I'm looking at rehearsals from a directorial perspective, looking at emotions and emoting through a directorial perspective in improvisational kind of space. That's also Ashima Tureno. And one thing that was very exciting for me was the way the actors explored their bodies in it. And it was Sharanya actually once who had said, I love to see women's bodies move like that without, any care in the world. And there is a dance, actually it's a part of a dance that's happening. It's a Kannada song called If You Come Today from Rajkumar's. And my actor just improvised once, and she really went berserk on one rehearsal day, and I said, okay, we're keeping it in the show. So I love watching bodies of women like that on the stage, where it is not coy and shy and whatever the label ladylike means. This is from my latest project for Gender Bender. It's Amma Makkalu Ellinda Bartave, and the entire thing, given the pandemic, was done online. And this is one of the 6 pieces that we did. And these stories were largely about sex experiences of women, and also of 2 non-binary folk who were part of the team. And it was taken from real life stories again. And that is something that I keep going back to, maybe because playback background of grounding everything in very real experiences that's been happening. And also it's a very interesting thing that I've seen. Whenever we talk about sex in our circles, even my friends' circles, we automatically switch to English. There is almost no language to talk about sex in Kannada. And the latest project was largely about exploring that. We ended up coining terms for vibrator and menstrual cup and everything, because we didn't find words. And finding that language of playmaking, I think, has been my main pursuit. I also recently finished my dissertation, which was basically about the heuristics, which is cognitive judgments that people hold against women directors. And I had the privilege of talking to 11 women directors, and some of them spoke to me for hours. And that has just solidified my belief and reaffirmed that we really need an alternative way of playmaking. So that's been my process. What is the Kannada word for vibrator, if I may ask?
Sorry, for vibrator, is it?
Yeah.
So one of my fellow thespians, Surabhi, has coined this. She calls it TMK, which is Tode Madhyada Kampaka.
Roughly translated, it's kampaka is
Vibrator.
vibration between the thighs
Between the thighs.
for public interest, in public interest.
That was one of the confusions we had. Really. Yeah.
Thank you, Rashmi.
Thank you.
Sharanya?
Hi, it's so nice to see people here. Deepika, Yuki, hi, it's lovely. I wish you could see all here. You're huge on the screen. I'm going to take a picture and send it to you at the end of this. We must do a selfie. I feel that's one of the most important things women must do in theater, take selfies. I think we must center the frivolous, or what has been considered frivolous. I think in Deepika's show that she just showed you the pictures of I Am Not Here, and I worked with her, we collaborated on that show. And in the show, we take a selfie, and I think that's so powerful. The idea of centering yourself in a picture, bringing things which are considered otherwise frivolous, I feel like that's important politically for women's work to be able to do that. Anyway, talking about my work, what I do is I work with gender, I work with language, I work with tradition. So these are three large things that I'm interested in. I work in Kannada and English language theatre. I write and direct, and I perform in both languages. I work with women directors. I collaborate with internationally. My latest work, some of which pictures of it you must have seen in I'm Not Here, worked with Deepika and Ranita Mukherjee. It was a play about censorship of women's writing and what does that really mean. Akshayambara is another show where I work with the dance drama form of Yakshagana, which has been performed for the last 800 years by men. And in the show I perform Kaurav, I perform a man, and sort of try and explore what is masculinity in that show. My latest work, I work with 9 transgender women from Arwani Art Project, and it's a show called Nava, which is soon, I think, going to be here in BIC. So my work is really collaborative. I work with women and gender. So that's really where it's at. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharanya. Maybe hear from Yuki. Yuki, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Oh, yes. I was thinking we'll get to see some of Sharanya's work through clips or videos. And then I was like, oh, that's me. Okay. Lovely to be with everybody. This is, we don't know what order the photographs are coming. So it's a nice surprise for us. This is actually a still from research for a play that I did in Haryana, for a play called Hello Farmaish. A lot of my work basically begins either with a premise or with form as something I want to explore. And I often begin, and actually I always begin from a very fun, mad, joyful beginning point, which could be anything, which is like my first play that I created from text to finish line was Elephant in the Room, which was about Ganpati. And what if he doesn't like his elephant head? And what if he wants to find his old boy head? So it just began with a what if, and from that point, it became a much more complex narrative, of course. Another play that I did was Hello Farmaish, which was about girls in Haryana, the ones you saw, and they dreaming of space, aliens, and black holes. What would happen then? This is Yatagarasu, which is form, I would say form induced. I wanted to work with dancers and hip hop artists and contemporary dancers. And so we created a show called Yatagarasu, and it was for children, a big ensemble show about what kids go through in school in terms of all kinds of bullying and how do they come out of it. So using dance really as the show. So the work begins from random, I call it random dreaming, and blows up into several years of writing or thinking and constructing. I love collaborating with a lot of artists. And I like to work with people who are not from my family or friends necessarily. So I'm always looking to find more people, new people to work with. So every show has been a very diverse cast, a very diverse set of designers and collaborators and musicians, etc. This is a show called Basti Mein Masti that you're seeing. This, as a starting point, was just that I want to perform outside of theater venues, and I want to perform to audiences that don't usually come to the theater. And that was the starting point for this one. Actually, the lady who works in my house is called Geeta, and I was visiting her home one day just to chat with her kids. And I saw this empty space in her basti, and I said, you know what, we'll make a show and bring it here for you. And this is the one. I get a bunch of friends to do this show. And it's just a nice, fun, entertaining show, which we do for non-theater going audiences. I love mask work. And so this was one of the first few productions that we co-produced as a theater group called Duse Brothers, Comedia dell'arte. A lot of my training has been in physical theater coming from the Jacques Lecoq School, but I love good text as well. So some people like to just think as Yuki's work as, oh, she does movement work, but we spend a lot of time creating very rich stories, very rich narratives. We work with many writers, and we work in Hindi and English so far. And the next piece of work that I will do is with a mask, and that means no dialogue at all, but still a very richly crafted story. So me, fun, it becomes, it moves to a very poetic space as well. A lot of my work, a lot of richness of different themes. The world affects me every single day. And so as I create each piece of work, you know that every single day we get affected, and it will find its way in the work somehow. And therefore, the many layers of the work then from that playful point becomes a lot more layered, like life itself. This is Elephant in the Room. It's a one-woman show. I really did make it as a piece of work that I needed to liberate myself from what I thought theater was binding me by when I worked with other people, or the narratives that already existed, then people were picking up. So it was a show that I was like, you know what, I'm going to really perform the way I want to, which is my body is going to have a great time. It's going to be very expressive, and it's going to have a full language of expression. I want good text. I want to be able to break down all the genders that I play, or animals. So it was a very rich show for me as a performer and a creator, and I would say as a woman, to make. And it was a very defining moment for me in my career as a theater maker. And I think that's about it. Maybe we'll watch a little clip of this. With the sound would be nice. Okay. Yep.
My head. We got the freak. We got the freak. A very large but very rare freak. Sir, I cannot tell your shape. Are you a circle or are you a square? My head, my beautiful clay hair, washed away by the tears that I cried last night. Destiny, undone by my own hands. My head.
A day like this was witnessed never before.
I myself am Murk, the hunter, and the fastest feet in the forest. My moves are very, very swift. I do my workouts daily, and she, my Momo, sharpens her wits, and that is why I am the hunter. She is the mastermind.
If the mission would have failed because you used your head instead of ours, we will still be rewarded by your father for our good services. Any ands, ifs, or buts along the way will not be considered. What is that? Come to Africa. But how far is Africa, Spotty? Hoi, 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 hoi.
Part man, part beast, they say I am. Part man, part beast, I now feel. feel. Who comes for me now? When my own didn't come. Who cares for a suffering? That is not their role. Misfit, mismatched, misjudged. I'm in this world, all alone.
Lovely. That was beautiful. Thank you, thank you, four of you, for speaking about your work and showing us glimpses of it. One thing that sort of jumps out is an owning of the body in all four of your work, of movement, of experimenting with what shapes your body could make. Since the title of the session is performing gender, can you take a moment to reflect on this phrase, performing gender, and how you sort of approach your work is coming from a certain kind of body that inhabits certain experiences, and using memories that only that kind of body can possess, but also tell stories that are not so often. Am I? Do you? Okay, let's sort of delve into the phrase of performing gender. What do you feel when you reflect on performing gender? The phrase, because it's when one says gender, because also the kind of milieu that we are in, we immediately when the word gender comes, it's that the images that are conjured are that not of the mainstream, that is not male, that is not which is sort of hidden or exotic. So when one says we're talking about gender, it automatically sort of becomes of the other. So can you reflect on this phrase, performing gender, and how you approach your work?
Maybe I could talk about an example of performing gender was, okay, I'm very confused about where to look. Okay. Yes.
The camera up there.
Okay. Oh my God, look here. Okay, great. Okay. So, so there was a play that I did called Akshayambara, which I think I want to talk about simply because it used gender as a very specific binary and sort of used the idea of vesha, the costume, therefore, that you wear, sort of very politically, relating to the privileges that a certain vesha has, right? And once, and what the play did is it used the form of Yakshagana, where men perform Yakshagana for several centuries, 800 known years, and men also perform the role of women. So therefore, they are called the Stri Vesha and Purusha Vesha, right? So the idea of gender becoming a Vesha, which you can wear and remove, was a very privileged idea of what a womanhood is. It's a sari, it's a vesha, it's something that you wear. So therefore, when men perform this Stri Vesha and they're on stage, all of the experience remains artistic, right? So you're wearing it as a vesha. But what about, so therefore, when I was working on a play about gender in Yakshagana specifically, in a space that does not allow a woman to enter, but it uses a man to play a woman, then therefore what does gender mean when a female body enters that space? So the play sort of reversed genders. It sort of had a woman play a man and a man play a woman, and sort of try and see the politics of gender. What happens when a body that is not supposed to play a certain gender takes that on? Is it welcome? What does it question? What does it bring with it? And I think it was a very harrowing experience, being embodying the male, in that way, where when your body is not allowed to do that. It's so easy to accept a strivesha. The politics of a man becoming a woman is something that is so accepted traditionally, but a woman playing a man, a female body playing a man, suddenly has very, very different standards with which it's judged. And I think I'm here with so many of you who have played men. I know of Deepika's work, which does that. And I think Yuki's work with Pooja, who does that, like a questioning of that particular kind of privilege, which it's not just a vesha, it's an upgrade from when I speak to trans men. They tell me that becoming, when they tell me that even in the idea of transness, there is the patriarchy, right? So you cannot upgrade to a man, whereas the downgrade is okay to some extent, right? Yeah, so I think playing gender is highly political. And even in the playing of it on stage, you sort of see, how difficult that can be and how many challenges this female body has to face. And for the person playing it, it's very interesting. I would love you guys to chime in, because who do you play? Who are you? Who are you when you embody the man? And I think those are the questions we have to deal with. In what ways are you going to play this person, right? Yeah, so I think it's a minefield, playing gender. It's interesting, yeah.
Would you like to respond to that, Rashmi?
Yeah, when she was talking about playing a man, and I directed this series for a going to school NGO, and we had to play mansplainers or like Eve teasers, and all we did was stick on a black tape or a cardboard piece and just play the man. And the way a man's body responds, right? The man spreading, the sitting, the voice, and the sense of entitlement, and that we felt when we became that character for a few seconds. And I remember one of my performers saying, Rashmi, this is so easy. Like existing as this body is so easy, because suddenly there is, I think there is certain privilege in embodying that cis het male, I got this kind of entitled space there, which was it was quite an interesting experience, the whole thing. And I've heard many of my colleagues speak of the woman's body being a political site, and each thing that we do, the way we move. And in Kannada Sex Stories, the Amma Makkalu project, the last one is about sex itself. And it is done with a metaphor of Sevantke, that's a flower. And each one of them talks about experiencing sex differently. There's the heteronormative sex, there is self-pleasure, and then there is a non-heteronormative sex. And each of this becomes a narrative. And for me, performing gender is closely tied to that as well, of our the expressions of our sexuality as well. Yeah.
It's interesting because Sharanya, you said that it was a difficult process to embody a man, but that response from your colleague was so diametrically opposite. Why do you think that?
Simply because the presence of an audience. I think in women's work, one of the things that we do not that we don't speak about a lot as being a huge censor is performing to an audience. Performing to an audience who doesn't, for example, get it. Here you are displaying misogyny, and it's not recognized. An audience doesn't see it. So it's harrowing, right? So here you are writing, performing, embodying, but you refuse to look at it. That is the harrowing part. But I do get what you mean about about the privilege of that body. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Deepika and Yuki, would you like to respond to this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I never started, this is performing gender also suddenly scares me because it has all these connotations of gender discourse, which I guess I understand and engage with, but as a performer, you try to also keep that part of your brain a little distanced from. I don't know if that makes sense, but essentially in No Rest, where I play men, women, creatures, and even in I'm Not Here, where where the women play men, women, and the dancer literally actually plays creatures, spider and dog, and use the body. I think the idea is that, like I said in the beginning, what can the woman's body be on stage? There's absolutely nothing that it cannot. And it just comes from that idea of creating a freeing possibility, but also this question of how you watch me, of how somebody watches us, so I don't know if it performs gender as much as it tries to distort it in the body. Like, it's that glitchy sound that you hear when there's a record that has scratches or something like that, I would imagine. Essentially to take that idea of the grotesque, of the fantastic, of into as many directions as possible, constantly thinking about what can that do for the larger idea of the play. So and I enjoy when other people are able to take the work and frame it in this and put it in current or existing or evolving discourse. And I somehow get a little bit worried when I have to do that myself, because I feel that is that kind of that blocks the performer and the maker a little bit, if if that makes sense.
I think I resonate a lot with what Deepika is saying. Maybe in my work, I'm not looking so much really at what the genders of the characters are doing. The entry point into the work is not there. It's really telling this very mad story with these many number of characters. And I love all of the characters for all their flaws and silliness and beauty. So I love playing male characters. It's a big thrill, but I guess in some way, like Rashmi was saying, there's a liberation of more choices you can make. But I think more than, it's not just in the body, but I think it's in the spirits of these different characters that I love to move from one to the other, and having that movement is really nice. And for me, so much of it, even with Elephant, with the Ganesha character, it's more than just with gender. It's this part animal, this part spirit. It's more of these complex emotions that it's feeling with its own family. And I channel a lot of my family into that. I channel my brother, who I barely know, a lot of those things. So for me, it becomes a lot of that exploration, which I really actually enjoy bringing in. And going forward, of course, with the work, these are good conversations that we're having now, and just hearing everyone, you look at work. I feel like I'm a very new director. I've only got 5 shows down. And the questions we're asking are going to matter as we move forward a lot. It's already mattered because I don't work with other people that much right now, because I can't play the roles they want me to play in the way they want me to be. So you grew up doing theater where I've had male directors tell me, you need to walk more like a woman, a little bit more woman-like. And I was like, I am a woman. Do you want to tell me how and that the range of how a woman walks is just la, 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 very elegant. And I don't know, everyone knows. And you wore a frock and you acted like a woman. You had fewer lines than the men. Okay, I got to play Portia once, but she also has to cross-dress into a man to get more parts. But so it was very limiting. And I will not be working with other people very often because of their choice of how to portray, especially the female body on stage or women characters. I have a problem with a lot of the work that I do see. A lot is changing and great. And I find a lot of the new work has been interesting by women who are actually creating new works. And that's why they're changing things around. So that's been the work that I enjoy more now to go see.
There is joy in disruption, isn't there? Sort of launching off of what Yuki just said, all of you create your own work, but a lot of us are still in an environment where we work with other people, or other people cast us, or other people invite us to collaborate. can you speak to us about or illustrate an example or a scenario where you have challenged an image that somebody else has created and brought, this is purely because the write-up to the session says we're talking about female gaze, but I do not want to sort of characterize it as female gaze, but as your, the way you look at an image and how you would have sort of turned it around or challenged it and flipped it. Can you sort of bring us an illustration, a specific image maybe? Who wants to go first?
Okay, I don't know if this is entirely pertaining to your question. You're talking about challenging a particular norm or an image in order to create. Essentially, I think my theater grew out of, like Yuki, and we've discussed this several times. I think this exact group of people must have discussed this in pairs several times. So it may not seem new to them, but for our audience and like people attending, essentially, I grew tired of in this like colonial theater that we were handed down, and we had to stand in a living room set and talk from the neck upwards. This theater was very boring for me. Also, there was very little to do for me often, and how long can we do this? Also, this was like, it was extremely boring, and this like Rashmi, meri baat sun lo, this kind of theater, like talking over the shoulder like this, was extreme. Sorry, Rashmi, but it's called Rashmi School of Acting. And I found that extremely boring, and I, in a way, like the theater I make, and I think the theater we make, whether consciously or not, has been created as a response to this kind of thing, even in terms of authorship, which is that even if the playwright is at the center of the work, which she is often in many parts of the world, including here, even that can be, even in that normative way of making theater where the text like dictates everything that else that we do, even there is a possibility to have a different kind of text, have a different vision of text. And I think, and I keep feeling this, I think we're part of a tribe of growing tribe of women who are really like, call us fringe, call us whatever, however you want to say it. I will find my space in this very fraught ecology, and I will do what I want. And then the viewing, how it gets viewed, and then how it gets written about, if at all it gets written about, how it gets critiqued, how it gets seen, how it gets what happens, is really not in one's control. But I think that starting point to say that I think this kind of very dated theater that allowed us very little in terms of the imagination, and wasn't in conversation with anything else around the world. Somehow that has been a huge problem as well. Like, how are we not like watching work from around the world, even if it's online, or if you get to travel a little bit, or productions come, like, how are we not in conversation with that? Why are we still in this situation? So I mean, I can ramble on for a while, but I'd like not to.
I think you answered the next 6 questions that I had. But would you want one of you to?
Well, I just want to respond. I don't know if that means, answering the 7th question on the back. But I just want to respond to what Deepika precisely said of, images that are challenged in work. I think every time that I worked with a woman director or a feminist production, it just absolutely in every way that it is structured, is different. Right? So even if it's a written work, it's always a negotiation. It's never, here are your lines, read them and walk like this. It's never that. I think in each of those productions, it's not just the work that is feminist, but the process that is feminist. I remember, the work that, I'll go back to I'm Not Here because, it's a play that I did with Deepika here. When we went to the rehearsal room, it was an hour where we'd work out to Punjabi music. It was work where we supported each other through times when we didn't know what we were doing. It was, I think Deepika was the director. Deepika also wrote several sections of the play, but it was constantly in negotiation with the performers. I'm not sure who the authorship of that play really belongs to at the end of it. And I think that really is feminist, in the way that it shares, in the way that it shares its credit, and in the way that it relies on each other. I think in previous work, I've been given scripts written, saying, don't change more than 7 words, as famously been said, I don't have to say who, right? It no more becomes my work, right? So it's sort of never have to encounter that in feminist work, I think is something that I'd like to add, yeah.
You're nodding.
Yeah. I think when Sharanya said it's never a given, right? And I think that is something that I have seen challenged generally in feminist work itself. I was talking to Nisha Abdullah, another director, and she spoke of how mental health is so important in the process of playmaking. And she had a therapist on board in one of her productions. And this person was at a distance from the production itself, so that, they're not necessarily influenced by the director or anybody, and whatever complaint would go anonymously. And also what I love about feminist rehearsal rooms is the non-hierarchy of it. There is no one right answer, and like, I am the one calling the shots. And I have heard male directors saying, if you have so many opinions, you go direct your own play. Started doing that, but still.
And you did.
Yeah, I did. So I think making space for that. I remember Sharanya once saying of, they say show must go on, but whose show? If like the performers are in a certain headspace, or they've come from somewhere where they're not in a show ready, I am ready to go do, then what happens there? So making space for all this, I think that itself is a challenge that's happening. Yeah.
Yuki, would you like to add something to this? Since your response sort of started us off on this.
No, I'm glad we moved to your 8th question.
Okay. Talking of feminist space, feminist work, just as an aside, once a college wanted to hire somebody to train their students, and I was in talks with them. I had already worked with them a couple of times, and this young man who's an English teacher is talking to this older woman who's meant to be hiring me. I was out of the room, but somebody else overheard and said, "Madam, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ careful ಆಗಿರ್ಬೇಕು, ಇವರೆಲ್ಲ feminist."
Like mass murderers.
So, yeah, people are afraid of us.
I mean, it's amazing, right? I feel like feminism is the longest running peaceful human rights movement. We've married and loved and reproduced and cooked and cleaned for centuries for people who've oppressed us. I don't see why this tag exists. It's sort of the most peaceful, the most loving movement that I can think of in the world.
What is it to fear us?
And dressed up in worn lipstick and taken pictures, been happy. I mean, for God's sake, performed and sang and made dance moms. And then they say, "Madam, you're a feminist, careful like any water."
Yuki said that you stopped working. I mean, you may not work with other people. What demands would you have? What would you ask for in a space if you were to work with other people? Or what, in terms of how would you invite somebody to work with you, or what would you need? What would you place as absolute demands if you were to work with somebody else?
Of course, I don't want to sound like a complete brat, like I don't work with others, but it's more, one is the choice of work. And two is how we work is very important. We've been part of extremely hierarchical, I would say a lot of bullying, a lot of, and very elite style, because I belonged, I came from this very English theater group. So I would say, everyone was very cool and hip, but in that cool and hip and eliteness, there's a lot of things that are very toxic, very unprofessional, very sexist, classist is, the worst kind, extremely feudal. And there again, I mean, not to say that it's men, women, because there I've seen women also be extremely classist, extremely exploitative. And for me now, these are very important. How we work may be more important than, what we make actually. I can't be part of that kind of environment anymore because I think I was part of it for too long without being able to have a voice to say, can we not do this? I didn't. And I feel ashamed of myself for having, I would say the bulk of my life, not saying don't do that to people when they treated other people badly or they treated actors, each other badly. I feel like we have put ourselves through too much bullying. I personally was a tough kid and I was, I think, quite talented. So people didn't take me on, but I saw them take a lot of people around me on. And I felt bad and ashamed that I didn't have a voice and I didn't know how to say no. I find it easier now maybe to construct my own environment where I feel like I will be more responsible and I can create a space that hopefully is more inviting to people to be on equal, and this is a long conversation because as a director, you may say my work is not democratic necessarily, but I want the space to feel a lot more healthy, mentally, physically, emotionally. It has to be a much, much more healthy, safe space and equal, whatever that idea of equal spaces, I want to be able to create more of that and be part of that. I won't go into new spaces now where I feel there's, it's just too weird. I find it alarming, and a lot of people don't find it alarming how people run their rehearsals, they run their shows. Yeah, but for me, that's now a very clear line.
Yeah, here. Sharanya, you were talking about the rehearsal room politics a few days ago. And what Yuki just said was also sort of on the same lines. Can you elaborate on
let me pick an example. Like I work in a show now recently. It's from a couple of years actually, and we've done very few shows of it. It's a show called Nava, where I work with 9 transgender women, and it's a show. I think the whole idea of a marginalized community entering a space which has not been allowed for them, but have known performance in very, very different, diverse ways. What does that welcome entail, right? So when someone enters the stage, what is this? What is the politics of this stage? Because they also enter that. Right. So I think a lot of this politics of the rehearsal room was something I had to ask myself constantly. What kind of politics am I bringing as a cis woman who's a director of the show? What is my position? How do I work with these people? Right. So, for example, even the idea of rigor that we've all been told that we have to follow in the theater, you have to show up, 10 o'clock rehearsals means 10. But a lot of the women come from spaces where they're not waking up from a good night's sleep and coming here. Many of them come from spaces where they've had to do sex work, they've had, which also necessarily involves drinking, which, a lot of risk, which is involved physically around that area. So for me to say, show up at 10, is not that, right? But yet, how do we maintain a rigor in the rehearsal room, right? But those are constantly negotiated. And the way that we did that is to make a story for which you will always come back. You want to come back to, that's the space that over 2 years, they find themselves back there again and again through all sorts of gritty personal tragedies, from discovering you're HIV positive in the middle of a show, what do? Do you say, come to rehearsal? No, I mean, someone takes their time off, they come. So one of the things that we had to do in the show is, when we do a show, I don't know, they don't have the privilege, many of us don't have the privilege to show up where we say we will be, even if it is a show, right? So in case someone can't come that day, for whatever reason, we hold space. So the play is designed in such a way that there is space for an absence of an actor. So what we do is hold up a placard or hold up the time to say she's supposed to be here, but she couldn't be. And I hope you hear her story. So she's not replaceable. Nobody else will tell her story. She will not be immediately, the show will not go on without her. It will go on for the rest of us, because that doesn't mean that one person has a tragedy and then we wait, I don't know how indefinitely, but we will hold her space for her, honor her story, and only she can tell it and acknowledge her absence. What I mean is feminist work in that way, can we hold space for each other in that sort of way? And I don't think it's impossible, it is. Even in terms of space in which we perform, they're so binary, we can't be intimate with an audience. You can't do these sort of things, And I think even theater spaces are changing. We see many more black boxes, right, Yuki? I mean, I think, Deepika, we see so much more of that kind of theater space itself arising, where the audience and the actors can be together. We can negotiate space in very different ways, and not this, you're the audience and I sit here and, I will talk in the lights and you will sit in the dark. That sort of politics also is being questioned. So I feel like these are spaces, structures, processes, people, all of this is evolving, I think, for a different kind of theater.
That is a profound kind of empathy. And when you say that, when you negotiate with your actors in Nava, that even the last time that I heard you speak of it, and now it's just that extreme, like really lovely kind of empathy that for me sort of embodies the existence of theater around me. I think we are running out of time, but we have to take a few audience questions. So before that, a tiny sort of, I'd warned Rashmi that we may do this. So Rashmi's dissertation was about stereotypes that people have about women directors. The audience is welcome to join. So Rashmi will shout out 5 statements, and we'll sort of put our hand up if we've ever experienced that.
This was supposed to be a never have I ever.
Yeah, it was never have I ever with gin. It's like gin with Lekha.
Guys,
but
this is not water.
Sorry, Deepika and Yuki. We didn't send you that gin. Yes. Women drinking, women misbehaving. This is what it is. Get used to it.
Okay. Actually, I have some statements that I would ask if you resonate with this, have a drink. But I feel like I've already spoken about that, like collaboration, mental health. So I'm going to call out some things that have been said to us over the process, and something that has been widely shared in my dissertation by almost all the directors I spoke to. The first statement is, if you have heard this statement, take a swig of water. Women are difficult.
Swig of water.
Putting hand up is also fine.
Left hand. Yeah, one of the 2 things. Yeah. You meander as a director. Smile more. All limbs. Life. But also probably in rehearsal rooms.
Yeah, why are you so grumpy? Basically?
Yeah. This is something that came in the statistics side. So if you resonate with it in any form of saying women are natural caretakers. and you're supposed to caretake in a space. Yeah. Yeah. Caretaking
I think
a
this
little
relates to
bit.
the smile question because when you look so grumpy, they don't want to risk it.
Yeah.
You'll be taken care of like that.
Yeah.
Fill up some water for you, Rashmi.
Yes, thank you so much. And yeah, I think I am done with my statements.
Thank you, Rashmi. That was enlightening. Any audience questions? Please come up to the mic here.
Hi, I actually have a full list, so I hope you all don't mind. I'm a student of creative education, and I largely love to work with theater to try and take stories of gender and environment and history to kids largely and adolescents. So one of the ideas was also when you're talking about something which is so political in nature, when you're taking ideas of feminism and history and the very convoluted history of intersectional feminism in India, and you want to try and break it down to get kids to understand things just as simple as consent or the fact that gender is not a binary anymore, and it never really was, but it was perceived as so, and just try and take those concepts and then how do you write like characters and tell those stories in a way that it's easy to understand and reflect. And okay, that's why there's a list of questions. So that is one. And two was also the idea of when you talked about having a therapist on board during the rehearsals and things like that. When you like taking from the idea of even theater of the oppressed, and when you have you have notions that are slightly triggering and you want to provoke even from the audience, but there is still like so much of that background work which goes into making it a compassionate space. So then how do you strike the balance between triggering but not in a harmful way, just to get the thoughts flowing? So that was the second part. Sorry, I'm just going to go on for a bit.
Sorry, can you pick like two things that you want the panelists to respond to?
Oh, okay. So, okay, then maybe the first two can be.
You can meet them outside later, but it's just that we're running out of time.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so then it's that, and just the idea of when you talk about the women's body and how it can be an object of desire and objectification, but at the same time you want to empower. So again, it's two questions of striking a balance. One about triggering but not in a harmful way, and how do you tell stories about such political things to kids? And the second one is empowering versus objectification. So thank you.
Who wants to take that?
I can try. I don't know if empower though not possible only because this word is, I don't know. I get really like, I don't know how, I mean, I don't know if my work can do that or if we can claim to do that in any case. And also now it's a word loaded in a very particular way, this empowerment of women, because it's also become like this corporate mantra, and like I don't know, but I think when I guess perhaps when we talk about empowerment, the idea that like we said in the process as well, you have some agency in the making of the work, you have a voice, and that you are respected as a person monetarily with creatively in many ways, that kind of thing. And also this thing about mental health and triggering and things like that, I really feel that we must, if the work does go into spaces that perhaps could do these things, then like Rashmi was talking about, Nisha having a therapist on board, I think we're all evolving, we're all in progress, and we don't this awareness about mental health and what it can do is also very new even to us, and we cannot claim to know everything about that. So it's nice to give a role to an expert, somebody who knows this what it can do, and bring them on, like we can have several collaborators. If you have a set designer, you can also have somebody who thinks about the emotional repercussions of what you're making. So but I think it really lies with who is at the helm of the rehearsal and who is thinking about which questions and which questions are important to which rehearsal, like if that answers your question at all. I'm just thinking out loud, I guess.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. We have tons of questions on Zoom as well. Maybe we'll take one question, and it is Freya Kothari asks, if you have to pick, what would be one advantage you'd like to bring to the forefront about being a woman in theatre, especially as a playwright and a director? Yeah, in a word, can each of you respond in one word? One advantage.
I think it would be, for me, the sheer relevance of what you have to say, because no one has heard it before till you say it.
I would say two things. One is continuum, because these things can exist inside the same practitioner. And two, this compartmentalization of faculties, that is such a masculine way of thinking of making work as well. It's not necessary. There are other ways to make theater. So if you are a playwright and a director, you are a performer, playwright and director, you're integrating, and you shouldn't be punished, rather rewarded for it, I think.
Yuki?
I don't know if I can claim any advantage on it, but what I can say is, I feel like I lost too many years not trying to make things because I thought I couldn't. And I would just, if anything, I would say women should just start making work, start putting themselves out there, and don't think you haven't reached the right time to do it. Just do it and we'll get there. So for me, it's not about the advantage I've found. I've not found the advantage. I've only just begun to find a way of doing things. And that has been exciting. And I would just say, we shouldn't start so late. Just start early. Just go for it.
I think in my process, it has been not having all the right answers and asking all the wrong questions. So that's what I would bring to place.
Here's to ask questions, wrong ones also and right ones. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Sharanya wants to take a selfie, so please stay where you are. Thank you, Yuki. Thank you, Deepika. Thank you, Rashmi. Thank you, Sharanya, for giving your time, for being here, for taking space, for having this greatly relevant conversation. I'm getting texts about how great it is to see all of you all and listen to all of you. And thank you, audience. Thank you, everyone at Museum of Art and Photography for putting this together. And good night. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Satya, for our ISL interpreter, for making this conversation accessible to everybody as well. Thank you.
Thank you.